Hi there, welcome to another video of the Confronter. It's been a while, so let's hope you haven't missed me too much and that you have missed me a little bit, though, but not too much, like I said, because that would be sad, wouldn't it? Now, these last months, you might have been wondering what I was up to. Well, mostly I was up to my ears and beyond, perhaps, in all sorts of responsibilities and activities and things that took my energy and time away from producing new videos. Let's say that a certain laziness also came over me, but let's not say that too loudly. Now, in this video, I'm going to do something a bit different. I will be presenting what I have called, what I have christened the so-called Econcentral Model, because nature, public health, the environment, and other green issues are things that are much on my mind. I am a great fan of nature, and I am very much concerned with how the quality or lack thereof of nature interacts with the human experience, with education, and with the general future our planet might be heading to. Now, that sounds rather ambitious, and perhaps it is. Now, the plan I'm going to present in this video is the so-called Econcentral Model, and that is pretty ambitious as well. I hope it will also be inspiring. Now, if you are disappointed by me discussing something like this, too bad. It is what I am going to do next. Now, if you do actually watch and listen to my video and its accompanying presentation, I hope you will be inspired by what I have thought of and what I am presenting to you now.
Great that you're watching. So in this video, I will tell you quite a few things actually about my so-called Econcentral model. This is a model I have thought of in order to have rather ambitious ways of integrating nature, culture, recreation even, and mostly dealing with, ecological issues in an economically viable and mostly educational and inspiring way. So first off, you will recognize that in this word I have come up with, see my name below there, we combine ecological with concentric and ecology. So we are talking about a model that incorporates ecology and economy in so-called concentric circles, a revolutionary and ambitious model for environmental, agricultural, and educational integration, you could also say. So let's delve into it. The model is more or less this. Now, you will realize that this being a model, it is an ideal. So basically, we start with a traditional zoo, more or less. That is what you should expect, really, for a zoo. So we have enclosures, we have pathways, we have facilities, and here is where we place the exotic animals, mostly the ones that are not part of the natural landscape or the cultural landscape that surrounds the zoo, but which are exhibited, mostly exotic ones, but of course you can also include native ones. Now, around that we have the so-called inner circle. Now, in it there is a safari enclosure. So you should imagine that once again we are talking about mostly exotic species being exhibited here, but they will be exhibited in a so-called safari setting. This includes lots of requirements for space, of course. You can imagine that people might be traveling through it with on foot, by bike, by car perhaps. And there should be pathways, of course, but mostly there should be a lot of room for animals. Now, the idea is also that some animals that are part of this landscape are able to go into the center, into the traditional zoo, as well as to the outlying circles. So I will explain something more about that in the upcoming slides, but that is the basic thing. You also know here that you can also see here that it's integrated in the natural and cultural and urban perhaps landscape around it. So we are talking about a situation in which we get progressively less exotic as we move on towards the outer circles, but also, sorry, but also that the surroundings are in touch with each other, and that we are talking about a model in which the exterior areas are also connected to the interior areas. So the exterior area, as you can see here, should have natural areas that are connected via the Econcentral, which would be the entire thing here. I've also included things buildings such as facilities and so on. Now, think of the words here. Eco, we've got the central because it's, well, ecology is central to the whole thing. We've got the concentric circles. You could also think of economy, really. And if you want to be very, very integrated in terms of your words and then want to have a double or perhaps triple portmanteau, you could also include école, the French word for school. So in this ecocentral model, we have the following core concepts: successively more extensively managed organized areas in concentric circles. It should be ecologically valuable. It's vital that there's a corridor function between different natural areas. Of course, the model shows hard boundaries, but they don't need to be hard. In fact, that might even be detrimental to what you want to achieve. It should be educational. Sustainability is a main thing. Research focused, because when you do something like that, you are also experimenting with having larger, more exotic wildlife, perhaps interacting with local wildlife, and you are also including various areas next to each other and having them integrate and flow into each other as much as possible. So you are including so-called ecotones. It should be self-sufficient as much as possible. So the animals living in the outer circles, so not in the traditional zoo, in the very center, of course, should be as self-sufficient as possible. And as we move on towards outer circles, we are also turning the animals into greater self-sufficient areas and greater self-sufficient habits. That's the idea. That also means that extensiveness, as in animals not being cared for and especially not being influenced that much, is important. It should be incorporated within the regional environment, and hopefully there's a synergy between nature, agriculture, research, humanity, and health. Ambitious, but it's in ambition that we achieve the most. So when we reach for the stars and we don't reach them, we've at least reached something, and we move beyond what we already had. That at least is my ideal and my, well, perhaps realistic take on all this. Still, I think anyone, any organization, anyone trying to incorporate this, and I hope people should try to aim for as much of this list as possible. Now, in the central circle, like I said before, we have a traditional zoo. Now, in my model, I have chosen a zoo in the Netherlands that happens to be in a rather extensively managed area and has quite a bit of space besides it, which includes other nature reserves, includes urban areas, includes forests, includes agricultural areas, lots of water, and so on. And this zoo, Beekse Bergen in the Netherlands, also has a safari aspect already, so I think it serves as a great model altogether. Now, you will of course not be able to do this in an urban zoo. It won't happen. But you should be able to do this in a more rural zoo, or perhaps one that happens to be, well, in an urban area, but with plenty of space surrounding it. These occur, of course. So you could also include a botanical garden, research facilities, greenhouses, an aquarium, and so on. This is, of course, a very dynamic model, and what you want to include is largely based on what you can include and what is possible and what you can manage. Now, it's most artificial and intensively used by humans of the entire Econcentral. There are hard boundaries, perhaps except here and there in the exterior borders. And well, the example, like I said before, is Safari Park Beekse Bergen. Then, in the first circle, we have something. We have the aforementioned safari park style exhibits, and within it, I think you can optionally include enclosed exhibits and other facilities because, well, some animals, of course, would require more care and more carefulness to integrate here than others. You will not probably have predatory animals interacting with rare prey animals, for example. Now, even if you include that, including large open areas for exotic fauna is essential. And there are hard boundaries between exhibited and more dangerous species, and soft boundaries for smaller, preferably native creatures. So that means that you should have the possibility for, say, squirrels, rabbits, birds, other creatures that live in the surrounding area to be part of this area as well. This is what often happens in zoo exhibits, of course, but the aim is that we are not just having them as visitors or intruders, but also part of the greater, of the greater picture and the exhibit itself. So you could also think of doing your best to include, say, bees, fish, and so on in the area, and then interacting with the creatures that are in the exhibits and which are not native or wild. Pathways are definitely what you should want here. Of course, you will probably also have cars traveling through, but that would not be the thing I'd prefer. If you have pathways, preferably you'd have them elevated or dug in, so they are part of the landscape and interfere with the animals as little as possible. Now, in the second circle, things start to turn a little bit more wild and a little bit more native. Now, keep in mind that wherever you have this Econcentral model being built, being integrated, the actual native species in the surroundings depend greatly on where you are. So what exactly is an exotic species and what exactly is a native species depends on the location. So in this second area, you should have enclosures plus wild areas. Now, wild is perhaps relative. You could also think of having, say, traditional farms, traditional meadows, and so on, things that are part of the natural landscape and the cultural landscape, but which are attractive to native species. That is mainly the main focus here. Now, there could still be enclosed exhibits here and other facilities, perhaps that's necessary. Now, something you could think of, for example, is you could have a swamp area which you want to have as an ecosystem for local marsh birds, for local fish, for local amphibians, and so on. But then you can also have an integrated exhibit which exhibits these species. Those might even, the individuals in there might even serve as attractors to their conspecifics that are in the natural area or that you want to attract. So exhibits are integrated within larger areas of the same biome. So you can close off part of the swamp area perhaps, but it's still an exhibit that is part of a greater area, and there should be some interaction. So you may have mesh that doesn't allow the birds exhibited in the swamp exhibit to actually leave, but it should be possible for, say, tadpoles, small fish, invertebrates, and so on to actually move in and out of the exhibit. Hard boundaries should be optional. Then any exhibits, like I said, should be ecologically integrated as much as possible. Once again, few pathways. Yeah, you need to have natural or cultural, in this case, areas that allow for as much peace, quiet, rest, and so on as possible. That is the goal. So you could see here that in my map, this would be around this area around the zoo. In the third circle, we have wild areas and extensive agriculture. So perhaps you want to have, well, cattle, you want to have horses and so on. You want to exhibit traditional land races or other livestock. Well, that's possible, but if you want to do so, it should be extensive. So the animals should be part of a greater area and should be part of interaction with nature, like they would probably have been in the past. Now, still, you can you can include exhibits that are enclosed and other facilities, fine. But essential is that different biomes are congruent with regional conditions. So if your regional conditions include meadows, include forests, include lakes, include whatever biomes that are part of the natural landscape, it should be they should be integrated within the greater third circle, and any animals exhibited there should fit that area. The focus should be on local wildlife and rewilding. Soft boundaries, but some boundaries that are hard are optional. Well, the ecologically integrated exhibits are there, very few pathways preferably. Now, in my wildest dreams, I'm also thinking of how, since rewilding is an essential thing here, you should bring, well, megafauna into areas where they used to be, but don't exist anymore. So when we're talking about zoos, you could even think, how great is that, of, say, hippos or rhinos in a European setting like the zoo I'm talking about, actually going and being allowed to go far and wide within the Econcentral. Of course, safety and so on guaranteed for both them and the visitors, but still interacting with a natural landscape that used to have creatures like that, but is currently missing them. In the very fourth, in the very last circle, the fourth circle, we have totally wild areas, or at least as wild as they can be. So these should be as unmanaged as possible, reserved for local wildlife and rewilding. There should be hard boundaries with the exterior world if absolutely necessary, but preferably not. Likewise, there should be no exhibits at all. At worst or at best, the circle itself should be the exhibit. So mostly you were talking about a landscape and wildlife reserve as it would have been in a normal situation as well, but perhaps even a bit more extreme in the sense that very few possibilities for humans or exotic animals for that matter to get in are part of it. They should be fully interconnected and interactive with external natural areas. So in my model, for example, we would be looking at this area. Now, I happen to know that there are several natural areas that are in the surroundings, and preferably you want them to be in contact with the fourth circle, and so that it is ultimately possible for local animals to benefit greatly from the Econcentral itself, and that they should be able in theory at least, and hopefully also in practice, to travel from outside into the Econcentral, and from there on, it should be even be possible to get in the other circles, and perhaps even to the very center for animals that are small enough and probably flexible enough to actually live there. Of course, a good zoo also includes lots of vegetation, scenery, and so on. So there should be areas for, say, smaller, especially microfauna and so on, to actually be part of the entire Econcentral. Now, I think educational values are extremely important in this too. So you should think of our Econcentral also using its special situation and its unique conditions, and hopefully in the future, when such models will actually be implemented, they will not be unique anymore, to educate the public and so on. And I think the economical part of this is that the agricultural areas within it, plus the visitor parts and so on, should be put to use to make this viable. Now, because lots of things about my Econcentral model would be rather extensive, and extensive in the sense of not needing much labor and so on. I think it shouldn't be necessarily be very cheap, expensive once set up. And that I think might be a good thing. But even so, there would be ways to profit of this. So, for example, by having products and that are produced by the extensive agriculture in the area, to be sold and so on. And given the special conditions, those might even command a rather large, high price. Now, the ideal Econcentral integrates the following things. So we have zoo exhibits and or botanical gardens. Now you can have a very wide view of this. So an aquarium, for example, is also a zoo exhibit. There are large natural areas for local life, and wildlife is probably the most charismatic and what most visitors would be focusing on. But you're also talking about all other organisms that make an ecosystem. There should be educational and research facilities. It serves a buffer function for the local environment. It builds connections. It makes connections between natural areas that might otherwise be isolated from each other. A recurring problem with nature protection in the modern world. There should be large areas that are inaccessible to visitors, at least. You want things to be sustainable, so to have renewable energy and to be circular as much as possible. I think the Eden project that you might have heard about in Cornwall is a pretty good example of what I am thinking of here. So if you want to know more details that I am not providing in this video, you will probably be interested in going to the Eden Project's website and reading more about how they implement sustainability, renewable energy, and circularity. Obviously, it should be accessible by public transport. Now, in my example I used, Beekse Bergen, we are talking about a location in the Netherlands, and generally locations in the Netherlands that are also used by the public and that want to attract visitors are well connected by public transport. Beekse Bergen is a good example as well, but that, of course, is not necessarily the case already for Econcentrals that might be in a different location. Traversable on foot or by bike, ideal. Now keep in mind that bikes can also be agents of roadkill, and especially where it concerns small animals that are not seen by bikers. So be very careful with that, I would say, to anyone trying to organize and plan and build an Econcentral. An Econcentral should revitalize nature and humanity because we are talking about creating a healthy area for both humans and wildlife and nature in general. There should be tranquility, rest, and recuperation, and the possibility for that. One of the worst things you could do is integrating all sorts of things that are noisy and create unneeded stimuli. So think of how many zoos include things like music, lights, shows, and so on. I would be very much against that. And there should be natural interactions. And by that, I mean natural interactions um, between the creatures that should be in the area, but also ones that are introduced in a rewilding sense. So you'd want some animals that are not rare, extremely expensive, or otherwise in great need of protection, to also have interactions with, say, and I'm going to be rather ambitious here, local predators, for example. So for example, if you include deer for the ecological function, you should also have the possibility for those deer to actually be hunted. When you have very large safari park style areas, that might be possible actually. So this is especially the case for the outer areas because as we move on from the very artificial center of the Econcentral, you will get more and more natural interactions. And yes, that includes predation.
So that was it. I hope you've been informed, inspired, and impressed. And if you feel like sharing my thought, go ahead, share. If you want to subscribe to my channel, go ahead, do it. And don't hesitate to leave a comment if you want to.